And so I want to start with a story. A while ago, I had a client who was court ordered to come to me. And also their parents wanted them to come. They'd been through a significant trauma. Turns out that they were the driver of a fatal car accident. And a very young person, just starting university, going off to live in a different place and in a different home, starting their college life. It should have been a wonderful, exciting time. And it was that, but it was also a lot of memories and flashbacks and difficulty from this car accident. So when I asked that first question, what will make this time useful? What are your best hopes from our conversation? They said, well, I actually have to be here. I'm court ordered to be here because I was the cause of this fatal car accident. So I have to be here. So, and since you are here and you decided that you would come, what will make it useful for you? And they said, well, I don't know. I said, yeah, that makes sense. And they said, well, I guess I need to talk a little bit about the accident, but mostly I'm just not sleeping and I'm having a really, really, really hard time right now with getting through my day. Having a really hard time getting through the day. And I'm having terrible dreams and all of these memories. And I said, so in the midst of that, how is it that you are getting through the day? And I said, well, I just try to focus. I try to focus on the little tasks of the day. And so then we started talking about the little tasks of the day. And I said, so if this is useful for you, this time together, being able to get through the day in a way that's okay, is that what would be helpful? And they said, yeah, that'd be helpful. And to not have so many flashbacks and not have so many bad dreams. And so I said, firstly, you can tell me what you want me to know, but I won't be asking for details about the accident, but I'm happy to listen if there are things you want me to know. Some of the details about the accident that I do want to ask you are maybe a little different question. And they said, oh, okay. Because a lot of people had been asking about the accident, lots of people, voyeuristic in nature. Oh my gosh, what happened? So how did they die? What did it look like? You know, and that was further traumatizing. And I said, so my questions are different. And they kind of, like looked a little intrigued. And I said, so in the midst of that really, really terrible moment, what are you somehow proud of, or what happened that was helpful, even a little bit? And I go, oh, well, I as soon as we came to a rest, the car was rolling and it stopped. And I called out to my friends in the back seat and I said, you guys okay? And I said, wow. So in this really terrible rolling over, one of the first things you thought was, are my friends okay? And they said, yeah, yeah. What else? Well, then I turned around and I could kind of see them, and they were crying, and I was crying, and we just kind of reached our hands out and we grabbed each other's hands and we prayed. I mean, we prayed, man. Wow. So not only did you call out to your friends, but you grabbed hands as best you could and you prayed together? Wow. What else? You know, my windshield, it was really, really broken, and I could see out through it, and I could see that the other driver, like, I knew him from school, and they were crying, and it was, you know, it was bad. It was pretty obvious that, like, the other person was dead. Like, you know, it's really obvious. But I saw the driver. I'm like, man, this is somebody from my high school, and I just graduated like a couple of months ago, and they did too. And I saw them, and I'm just like, oh. And I reached my hand out through the broken windshield, and I said, hey. And I said their name, and they were crying, and I was crying, and we could kind of, you know, like touch, like all our fingertips, and we just kind of touched, and we just cried, but we just, you know, we just touched. I said, wow, and that was good. Yeah, yeah, it was good. Because I could kind of tell that, like, they were breathing a little bit better, and I was too, and we kind of, you know, took a couple of deep breaths. So that, yeah, that does sound like a good thing. What else? Well, we all, you know, like, we all called our parents, because, you know, they were all young people, and we called our parents. And a lot of parents were really close by, and they came rushing to the scene, scared. And they, you know, some bystanders, they helped us out of the car, kind of, you know, drug us through the window, and we were waiting for emergency personnel, and so many people, they're like, are you okay? Are you okay? And like talking to us, and what's your name? And so there were these people that were so helpful. And then when our parents got there, like, they were hugging everybody. My parents, they weren't as close, and so these other parents, they were like hugging me. I said, wow. So all these things were true elements of the accident, true pieces of information that they hadn't been flashing back on. They hadn't considered what was helpful, what they were proud of, what other people were doing that helped in this horrific moment. They hadn't been flashing back on those things. And now they were a little bit. And I said, so since then, what's helped, you know, even a little bit to get through the day? And they talked about music, and, oh, what kind of music? Oh, you know, I play a couple of instruments, and that's, man, I can just like drift away while I play music. Oh, what else? So we were able to draw out strengths within the trauma, and strengths and resources outside of this traumatic time. And at the end of that one session, that first session, I asked, what was helpful today? And they said, you know, it was actually really, really helpful to talk about that other stuff. I hadn't really remembered that other stuff. They said I'd mostly been thinking about the terrible parts, the really terrible part. And this isn't a picture of their accident, but it's a really horrible accident. And now this person was able to remember also grasping the hands of friends and praying, And they were able to remember all these bystanders, these random people they didn't even know that came to the car windows and were like, you okay, dude? And the parents that hugged them and the love that they showed other people's children. Thought about the music and how that had just kind of, been such a help and get them through the day. Started to be able to think about some of their good memories from high school and the things that were exciting about college. And it didn't make the accident go away. The accident still happened. But now they were able to flash back on other things as well. And that is inspirational to me. To be able to, in the midst of arguably the biggest trauma, the biggest, most horrible incident in their 18-year-old life, to be able to also remember other things. That was helpful. So, what do you already do? How do you already help people? What kind of conversations do you elicit? If you are a friend of someone who goes through something horrible, being a friend who says, wow, how you doing? How you getting through? Can I buy you a cup of coffee? Do you need to walk? What happened that you're proud of? That seemed to be more helpful than the voyeuristic approach of, ooh, wow, tell me more about the accident. So this helpful talk around trauma, being able to talk about the rest of their life. Yes, this trauma, this difficult thing, whatever it is, a pet died and it's a horrible thing. It's so sad. Whatever the hard moment is, it's not always the thing that people want to talk about. In therapy too. So what is it that will be most helpful from our conversation? Maybe it's just, I got to figure out how to get to work because I've got to figure out how to compartmentalize enough that I'm not crying all day. Okay, so what helps with that? When you're able to not cry and do something else, what is that? It's like, well, I don't know, focus, be able to focus. Oh, okay, so what would you be focusing on? My kids or my dog or my work or, and getting to know enough about a person to be able to drill down into those details of what they want to be thinking about. To be able to give them an opportunity to flash back on more than just the traumatic elements, to be able to expand the narrative, not make stuff up, but to be able to recognize, yeah, that was actually helpful. To be able to build solutions and hope. And I'll talk about scaling some of these different things. This is one of my favorite quotes around trauma. It's by Yvonne Dolan. No matter how terrible the trauma, it's not the only significant experience in the client's life. If we respond as if it is, the client becomes the victim of our treatment and the traumatic event. I have this picture here. It's the picture of one of my actual clients' car, the dash. This person, we had been talking about suicide ideation a lot. They'd had many very serious attempts and a lot in their life that sometimes made dying seem like a pretty viable option. And so to be able to talk about their reasons for living, not just reasons for not dying, but actual reasons for living. And that's where this picture comes in. She said, well, my grandbaby. Oh, what's her name? Actually, I knew when her daughter-in-law was pregnant, and yeah, they had their baby. I'm a grandma. And she said, yeah, I live for my grandbaby and my kids. And so she started she had this magnificent idea, and it became one of my most admired ideas. Her primary way of attempting suicide was to asphyxiate herself. And so she said, I put pictures on my dashboard, so when I get in my car, that's the first thing I think about, not about how I've almost died in my car so many times. Like, oh my gosh, that's really amazing. That's super cool. So what is it that we're focusing on? How do we hold this dual presence with people to be able to hold the space for them to tell the things that are hard to talk about, and then also be able to talk about it in a way that's actually useful, not more traumatizing? So we've talked about that, connecting with strengths during the trauma and in other situations. We do, in fact, in solution-focused work, in all of our work, we acknowledge the trauma. It's not like we're like, oh no, we're not going to talk about that. We're only going to talk about good stuff. That'd be ridiculous. We can acknowledge the trauma. We can say, I'm so sorry. That must have been horrible. It's just that we also notice something else. We notice what else is happening. We create those new flashbacks of other real things that happened and are happening and that they hope to have happened. We choose what to amplify. What is it that they want more of? Because when we talk about something, it's more likely to increase. So if we're talking about trauma and the horrible situation exclusively, that's what's going to be in their head. So we need to choose carefully about what we're amplifying. And neurologically, that creates new pathways, or pathways that are useful and helpful that maybe I haven't walked on in a little while. Like, you know, since the house burned, I haven't listened to music in a long time. And I got out my guitar. It made it through the fire, and I got out my guitar and played a little music. Wow. And that was helpful? Yeah. Right? So that's getting into that path that was a useful thing, a useful place to go. So I want to give you all an opportunity to talk about these things so far. So grab a piece of paper and write down 10 things that you do that are helpful, that are reasons for living for you, that are your strengths, ways that you're helpful, things that you do to get through stress. That's kind of a lot of categories. So you'll probably need to write 15 things down. So I'm going to give you a minute of silence to do that. to write about you, to answer these same kinds of questions. And then we'll go into breakout rooms to share those things that you're willing to share. I always love to know what people find useful about a conversation, about a training. So feel free to use the chat to communicate that. I know that some of you weren't able to get into a breakout room, or there was some problem with it, and I'm sorry for that. I hope you use the time, those few minutes, in a way that was good for you, that was useful for you. So I want to give you some of you may have seen this. It's one of my favorite little pieces to put into presentations, into the trainings that I do, because this was such a profound session with this teenager who had experienced significant sexual abuse and relational trauma, and had a hard time, and also could find, you know, the joyful things to some degree in her life. So one day she came in and she said, "I'm not okay. I'm you know, really shaky, and it's been a crappy day. It's been a really crappy day." And so I knew that I had a choice here, and I knew I didn't want to talk about the crappy parts of the crappy day, and yet I still wanted to be able to give her a space to be able to talk about what was important for her. And I do a lot of scaling. And so to scale, you know, bad and good. Oh, so what's good in your life? When she's telling me it's a crappy day, I'm suicidal, it's one of the worst days, I you know, like blithely, oh, let's talk about what's good, is you know, felt like it would be insensitive. So I said, so you know how some days are really bad? I mean, it sounds like, you know, today's pretty bad, and some days are just kind of bad. And she, yeah. And so all of a sudden, what the top of our scale, what we were working towards or wanted to know more about, was kind of bad. Because you know what, my friend, kind of bad is a long distance from really bad, suicidal, I almost killed myself bad. Just kind of bad is, you know, to me, that seemed a little better, and that seemed to resonate for her. So I said, let's talk about that. So where are you today? And she gave herself that line, and I said, oh my gosh. So why are you that high? And that's a very specific question. People often hear it as, how come you're not higher? And they'll start to say, oh, well, because this and that, I'm not higher. And what I want to know is, how is it that you're so high on a day where you're saying it's a hard day? How is it that you're so high, you're doing as well as you are? And she said, well, I haven't hurt myself. Wow, how in the world have you done that? What have you been doing instead? And that's an important question too, that instead, what have you been doing instead? And she said, distracting myself. Oh, and how do you do that? And she said, well, music. Oh, what are you listening to? And so she was able to, this was a slow conversation. And I allowed that. I allow lots of silence for people to think, because the questions we ask, they can be hard questions. I asked her, what's the lowest you've been in the last few months? The reason I wanted to know that is I needed to know if, you know, kind of, this was my assessment, right, of risk. But I wanted to do it in a different way than maybe some of our traditional risk assessments are laid out. And she said, about there. I said, okay. And so today's a little higher. How is it that you have gone up from that really low point? And slowly, this question, she was able to say, well, sleeping. I just sleep a lot. Oh, okay, and that's helpful? Yeah. What else? And that's a question I ask a lot. What else? Because when I am amplifying good things, I want to know what else. I want to know what else, what else, what else. And she was able to come up with this terrific list, slowly, with lots of silent pauses, because she was thinking. I asked her, what's the lowest ever? And she extended it below. And then I asked, what helps to go up when you're in that lowest ever spot? And she said some of the same things. And then I asked her, where would suicide be? And she put it, down below lowest ever. Down there. And then I said, so I suppose that you've learned some of your warning signs, some of the things that you need to pay attention to. And she said, yeah. And I said, what are those? And she said, knowing about panic attacks. Well, what do? I get to a safe environment. If I start feeling suicidal, I do something to distract myself. Oh, like what? So it's a repetitive conversation, but to her, it was deepening, it was eliciting the things that were helpful in those hard moments. Listening to music, talking to friends, talking to her mom, and just getting out of her bedroom. Why get out of your bedroom? Where is better? And she said, well, that's where I've attempted before. No, makes sense. And she said, just stay away from sharp objects so I won't cut. So this was the entirety of our session that day. I asked her how useful it was on a scale of 1 to 10, with 10 being super useful and 1 being a waste of time. And she extended the line and she said, this was, on a scale of 1 to 10, it was like an 11, because it was a really crappy day and now it feels manageable. So it was a useful conversation. I'd like you to imagine a scale of 1 to 10, with 10 being your family at its very best, and 1 is the opposite, the struggles or difficulties that brought you into therapy. I asked this question of a family who was at the time homeless. They said 1 was them being homeless, and 10 is having a home again, feeling safe, having trust back. And then I asked them to choose figurines to create the picture of that future, that preferred future of having a home, feeling safe. They made a beautiful picture, mom and daughter together, of animal groups, feeling safe next to each other, having plenty of food, and doing things together, and having a home. The 1 is the chaos and difficulty of being homeless, not knowing who's going to be there or what's going to be happening or where you're going to be sleeping. On the scale of 1 to 10, I asked the daughter and the mom, where are you now? Daughter said, about a 2. Mom said, maybe a 3. You are currently homeless, and yet you're at a 2 and a 3. How is it that that's happening? They said, well, they'd done a few things. They're talking just a little bit better. And they'd put a bag together, so they had a few special items with them, no matter where they slept. These were great things for them to remember. I asked, when you're just a little higher, at a 2.5 and a 3.5, what will be happening then? The daughter said, I know I'll be at a 2.5 when we have a meal together. The mom loved that idea, and they started planning a meal together. This family was homeless, but they were not hopeless. Identifying the small things that were already going well and thinking about what slightly better will look like gave them a little more hope. This application of solution-focused play therapy has been very useful for me and the families I've worked with. I hope it's helpful for you. When we ask people to show us what they'll be doing when things are better, it's imagining and doing this preferred future, and that can change the function of our brain. Actions as well as thinking and imagining can change the functioning of the brain, quote by Norman Deutsch. I had a client come in with a significant trauma history, and she'd been in therapy a whole lot, and she was like, I got therapy down, this is what happened to me. And I'm like, wow, okay. A lot of stuff. And, you know, I asked her what will be helpful, and she said, oh, I just want to give you my history. I was like, okay. And so we did it in this way on a split sheet, because I also wanted her to remember during these times. I mean, she started at when she was born and went through, and I wanted to know what was helpful and what are the good things. And she said, oh, you know, when I was in foster care, I got to eat, and that was always a really good thing. And oh, what else? What else? And so she was able to fill in this left side of with the things that were helpful. And so that's another way of expanding the past. Ben Furman wrote a book called It's Never Too Late to Have a Happy Childhood. And I really love that. I love the title. And I think it's important to remember that, because we can be conscious of what it is that we're remembering, flashing back on. And so Ben's a delightful person, and it's a good read. The two stories that I spent time with today, the car accident and the crappy day, I wrote those two accounts up, those case studies, and they're in this brand new book that's over on the right side, The Solution-Focused Approach with Children and Young People. I have 2 chapters in there. One is on solution play therapy, and the other one is on trauma. It's called Yes and, because I think that we have an obligation to be able to draw out the and, the what else, what would you like instead side. The middle is another chapter that I have another book I have a chapter in, and the left-hand book is the book that I wrote. I have a full-day workshop on trauma coming up. I have the title of it there. You can find it at my website, solutionplay.net. You just scroll down to the bottom and click on the picture, you'll see it there. That's September 25th, and I would love for you to join. If this was useful for you, it'll be a full day of conversations, ways to be helpful around trauma. I'd love to hear more about you, to connect with you. I put my Facebook link there, and there's a terrific solution-focused conference coming up in November, which is SFBTA, Solution Focused Brief Therapy Association. It's online, so if you live in Europe or you live in Africa or Canada and you wouldn't usually travel, this time you can. So come and join us. I loved being here with you. Look at it, it's 30 seconds before the top of the hour. I appreciate that you were willing to chat with each other and to be with me for this hour. It's been really wonderful. So thank you, thank you. Wave to each other, say goodbye. This was wonderful. Please join me again for another event with Solution Play Training Center, and have a great day.